Today we are going to talk about the Early Literacy Skills Builder, its two components, building with sounds and symbols and building with stories, its 14 objectives, and level assessment. During this presentation, we will be doing hands-on activities, so it would be helpful to have your ELSB kits in front of you. As it says on the slide, the Early Literacy Skills Builder began shipping in the fall of 2007. Although it is a relatively new program, we have seen success throughout the country, and I hope you see success in your classrooms as you begin implementation of the Early Literacy Skills Builder. One of the reasons why the Early Literacy Skills Builder has been so successful thus far is due to the fact that it is the first and only scientifically based program for students with moderate to severe cognitive disabilities, including autism. Throughout this presentation, I will discuss the research group, which consisted of students aged 5 through 10 who were identified as having a moderate to severe cognitive disability or autism with an IQ of 55 or below. To emphasize the need for collaboration in teaching students reading, you'll see how each author's background played a role in creating this well-rounded early literacy program. First, we have Dr. Diane Browder, who is the principal investigator behind the Early Literacy Skills Builder. She reviewed over 100 studies looking at literacy for students with moderate to severe cognitive disabilities before writing the curriculum. Susan Gibbs is listed next, and she was the literacy specialist who identified the key components that were necessary for an early reading instruction program. Lynn Algrim-Dalzell was the statistician behind the Early Literacy Skills Builder. She is currently collecting data from the 4th year of research as part of the ongoing 5-year study. Next, we have Ginevra Cortade, who had a background in working with the moderate to severe population in the classroom and was very instrumental in writing the curriculum. And lastly, we have Angel Lee. Angel Lee has worked significantly with the severe profound population, and she helped to create and write Level A, which is an optional level for those students who do not yet have picture discrimination or awareness of books. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about Attainment Company, but just to reiterate, the authors were behind the research of the Early Literacy Skills Builder, and the Attainment Company is solely the publisher of the program. When we did receive the program initially, it was over hundreds and hundreds of documents that we created into the kits that you have today. In teaching students with moderate and severe disabilities to read, there really is an old way of thinking. For example, in some school districts, progress in learning to read is based on an IQ level. If a student has an IQ of 30, perhaps they are not taught to read. In many cases, sight words are used as a functional alternative for those students who cannot become literate. And actually, in the year 2008, I visited many school districts where there really is little to no literacy instruction for these students. In order to create the Early Literacy Skills Builder, Dr. Diane Browder and her team looked at the past research for reading with the moderate to severe population. And really what she found was that there was a consistent lack of focus on literacy for this population. And in the last 20 years, while there's been this science of reading that continues to develop, the focus in severe disabilities has really been on functional life skills. And we know that life skills are important, but we'd also like these students to be exposed to literacy as well. In order for you to get a better idea of the background of the program, I'm going to show a brief video clip of Dr. Browder and Susan Gibbs discussing the beginnings of the Early Literacy Skills Builder.
The Early Literacy Skills Builder, or ELSB, grew out of a research project here at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte.
Our research began with exploring the literature on how to teach reading to students with moderate and severe disabilities. We began by conducting a comprehensive literature review. We found all the literature that existed on reading for this population, going back as far as 1975 to the current time, over 100 studies. Our original goal when we started out doing research was not to write a curriculum. We were hoping to find one.
What they found instead was not so much about learning to read, but learning sight words.
Which is a good goal, but not the only goal of learning how to read. The assumption was that the students might learn a few sight words for functional living, but probably would not become readers. Some development of sight word vocabulary is certainly important, but to only provide sight word instruction is to place a ceiling on students' literacy skills.
We have for so many years said these kids can't learn to read, so we won't teach them. I've gone into classrooms as a supervisor and many times said to teachers, now, this little girl over here is 8 years old. What are you doing for her in reading? And the teacher will say, well, she's not ready yet. And what ready meant, we're not sure.
As the video showed, Dr. Browder looked at over 128 different studies looking at reading for students with moderate to severe cognitive disabilities. In addition to those studies, they also looked at the National Reading Panel and identified 5 essential components for early reading instruction. Those components included phonemic awareness, phonics or alphabetic principle, vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension. In order to discuss these components in further detail, I'm going to show a brief video that discusses the 5 National Reading Panel components prevalent in the Early Literacy Skills Builder.
They compared their findings to those of the National Reading Panel, whose own study had identified skills that were critical to developing reading. Those findings include phonemic awareness, alphabetic understanding, or phonics, vocabulary, and comprehension. With these principles in mind, the Charlotte researchers created the Early Literacy Skills Builder. But the question remained, would it be effective for students with moderate to severe cognitive disabilities? And what about students who are nonverbal or have limited vocalizations? Would phonics and phonemic awareness work for them?
I've worked with these kids for a long time. 1986 I think is when I started working with the severe profound population, and the kids that can't talk really can't make sounds, and phonemic awareness just didn't make sense to me.
With the help of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg School District, they decided to put the ELSB to the test.
All of our research is being conducted in real classrooms in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, thanks to the wonderful cooperation of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system. And it's being conducted by teachers. Those same teachers, by the way, and the way our randomized trial works, students are assigned to treatment. So a teacher might be teaching, and most are, both the experimental curriculum, which is the Early Literacy Skills Builder, and a control curriculum.
The technical name is, it's called a randomized control design, which is the gold standard of group research. And special education is not used to group design research. This is really breaking ground. We actually are randomizing a student so that in a given classroom, a teacher will have students who are getting the curriculum and those who are getting an alternate curriculum that they would traditionally get. And in our school district, that would be the EdMark program.
So these teachers have learned to teach 2 different curricula.
Before a student is instructed, we give a whole battery of tests, and some of these tests are already published tests, like the CTOP, the Comprehensive Test of Phonological Processing, or the TOWER, Test of Word Recognition Efficiency, DIBBLES, the Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test. There's a variety of ones that we are given. Students receive the instruction all year long, and then we post-test them at the end of the year. It's a very high-quality research that we're doing for this.
As mentioned in the video, there are 5 essential National Reading Panel components. This chart shows you where each National Reading Panel component is shown or comes up in the Early Literacy Skills Builder. For example, we have phonemic awareness. In the early part of the Early Literacy Skills Builder, the student identifies the concept of word and also starts to learn the beginning initial consonant sounds. In the middle part of the program, the student is responsible for identifying the initial and final consonant sounds, and towards the end of the program, the student has to segment and blend phonemes together. You can see how this chart shows you each National Reading Panel component and where you will find it in the Early Literacy Skills Builder. As Dr. Browder and her team of researchers mentioned, they looked at over 128 different studies in teaching students with significant disabilities to read. As you can see on this graph, you can see a heavy emphasis on sight words, as well as picture identification and fluency. However, there was not a lot of emphasis on phonics, phonemic awareness, or comprehension. And that was the reason behind the authors including these components or concepts in the Early Literacy Skills Builder. So many people have asked, why try intensive phonics for reading for these students with moderate to severe cognitive disabilities? And the researchers looked at all of the previous research synthesized by the National Reading Panel and saw that phonemic awareness was really one of the #1 predictors of success in learning to read, and hence essential in the early literacy skills builder. Additionally, phonological awareness training may be applicable with this population. Many people thought that perhaps this type of training would not work, but we found in fact that it does. And lastly, students with cognitive disabilities may be older when they begin phonological awareness training. And that's also the reason why many school districts are using the Early Literacy Skills Builder with elementary, middle, and high school students.